The airlock door hissed open, revealing a human in a bright orange jumpsuit holding a mug that boldly proclaimed, "This is fine." Behind him, a cratered landscape of blackened metal and smoking debris stretched as far as the eye could see. "Ah," the human said, casually taking a sip from the mug. "You're early." Captain Vrex of the Althal-Tor expeditionary fleet found himself momentarily stunned. Early. They were 3 rotations behind schedule after meticulously planning their reconnaissance of Earth, ensuring stealth protocols were adhered to. Their cloaking devices were impervious. The humans shouldn't have known they were coming. Yet here was one, singular, unarmed, and nonchalant. "This is the site of an extinction-level event," Vrex said, his translator doing an admirable job of keeping the disbelief out of his voice. He gestured to the devastation. "By our calculations, nothing within a 30-click radius should have survived." You'd think that, wouldn't you?" The human shrugged and pointed to a smoldering fragment of what appeared to be part of an alien craft. "Nice ship, by the way. Was it yours?" Vrex narrowed his eyes. "It was a drone, designed to test your world's defensive capabilities." "Ah, well." The human turned the mug around so Vrex could see the other side. It now read, "Oops." Vrex's subordinate, strategist Ovlon, muttered something in their native tongue, a mix of frustration and confusion. Vrex understood the sentiment. For centuries, the Althal-Tor had surveyed developing civilizations, cataloging their technological and cultural milestones. Humanity had ranked low on their charts, fractious, primitive, and distressingly fond of setting their own planet on fire. Earth was supposed to be easy. Your planet launched what appears to be an improvised nuclear weapon within 7 minutes of detecting our drone, Ovlon said, addressing the human directly. That level of coordination defies your documented capabilities. "Improvised is a strong word," the human said. "We prefer adaptable. Innovation under pressure is kind of our thing." "Adaptable," Vrex repeated, letting the word hang in the air. He doubted the human truly grasped what had occurred. Their weapon shouldn't have been able to pierce the drone's defenses, let alone annihilate it. The Althal-Tor were not careless. Their drones were built to survive direct hits from civilizations thousands of years more advanced. The human tilted his head, studying them. His expression shifted, but not to fear or awe. It was curiosity. "So what brings you to our corner of the galaxy? Thought you could pick on the backwater kids without a fight?" Ovlon bristled at the insult. "We came to observe, not pick. It was a standard protocol reconnaissance. Your species is statistically irrelevant." "Statistically irrelevant," the human repeated with a chuckle. "And yet, here we are." The human gestured broadly at the wreckage. It was a peculiar mix of self-awareness and smugness that made Vrex uneasy. No species faced certain annihilation with such casual defiance. Most species they encountered during reconnaissance missions either surrendered outright or resorted to desperate attempts at diplomacy. This human appeared to find the entire situation amusing. Vrex decided to change tactics. "You misunderstand. This encounter was not intended as an act of hostility. We were merely assessing your capabilities to determine if your civilization warrants inclusion in the Galactic Accord." The human arched an eyebrow. "And blowing up your drone is how we say, 'Yes, please include us'?" "It is. Highly unusual," Vrex admitted. "You are not known for technological innovation or cohesive global strategy." "Yeah, we're kind of a mess," the human admitted, finishing his coffee. "But that's where you guys messed up." "Messed up?" Ovlon's voice cracked slightly, betraying his irritation. "Yeah," the human said, setting his mug down on a twisted piece of debris. "You assumed we'd fight fair. You thought you could just waltz in, throw some shiny alien tech at us, and measure how fast we'd panic. But humans don't work like that. We see a problem, we fix it, even if the solution's messy." Vrex exchanged a glance with Ovlon. "Your species cobbled together a planetary defense system in minutes? This is not consistent with your documented capabilities." The human grinned. "See, that's the thing. You've been studying us like we're ants under a magnifying glass, but you missed the big picture." "Enlighten us," Vrex said, his tone dry. "We're not the smartest species in the galaxy. We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the most disciplined, but we are the scrappiest. We've been punching above our weight since day one, and we never fight alone." "Fight alone?" Althal asked. "Yeah." The human spread his arms wide as if welcoming them to some grand revelation. "Humans don't just rely on what we've got. We take what's around us and make it ours. We don't need to build perfect weapons or design flawless defenses. We just need to figure out what works. And who else might have something we can borrow?" Vrex's gaze drifted to the wreckage again. Now that the human had mentioned it, the debris field seemed inconsistent. Among the remnants of their drone were fragments of Earth-made machinery, primitive satellites, long decommissioned space junk, even pieces of what looked like a weather balloon. Had they scavenged their own orbital debris for parts? "You refused to destroy our drone?" Althal asked, his voice thick with incredulity. "Not just refuse," the human corrected. "We used whatever was lying around. It's called improvisation. You guys should try it sometime." Vrex considered this. In all their centuries of exploration, the Althal-Tor had never encountered a species that approached problem-solving with such reckless ingenuity. It was disconcerting. "And you expect us to believe this was done without centralized coordination?" Vrex asked. "That your fragmented civilization—" "Ah, see, that's the other thing you got wrong," the human interrupted. "We don't need central coordination. When the chips are down, humans don't wait for orders. We just act. Everyone throws what they have got into the mix and hopes it works out." "That is not an optimal strategy," Althal said. "Maybe not," the human said, grinning again. "But it works." Vrex stood in silence, processing the human's words. He had read countless reports on developing civilizations, their strengths and their weaknesses. None had ever prepared him for this. The human species' success appeared to hinge not on precision or mastery, but on chaos and an almost reckless drive to make things work, no matter the odds. It was as if their very lack of strategy had become a strategy in itself. Althal, less willing to let the conversation spiral into ambiguity, leaned forward, his translator modulating his voice to sound authoritative. "You claim improvisation and disorganization as virtues. Yet the destruction of our drone required precise calculations. The energy discharge alone would have taken about 30 seconds to figure out," the human cut in, holding up his hand. "You're thinking too big. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We just needed to figure out where to point the hammer." Vrex frowned. "Hammer?" The human chuckled. "It's a saying. Means we didn't need something fancy, just something effective." He gestured toward the wreckage again, as if the answers were scattered among the debris. "You guys brought your shiny drone into Earth's orbit, right? That thing screamed superior tech from the moment it showed up. Sure, it had fancy shields, but those shields were designed for a direct threat. Missiles, lasers, plasma cannons. So we gave it something it wasn't ready for." "What was that?" Althal asked. "Hundreds of low-orbit projectiles fired in unpredictable patterns," the human replied casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Some of it was space junk, some were specialized munitions. Nothing individually strong enough to trigger your shields, but together? Like a swarm of angry hornets. Your fancy drone couldn't keep up." Vrex turned to Althal. The strategist's crest feathers twitched, a clear sign of unease. The Althal-Tor drone's defense systems were specifically designed to counter high-energy attacks, not the crude yet effective tactic the human described. The realization was as humiliating as it was baffling. "So," Vrex said slowly, trying to regain control of the conversation, "you are suggesting that your victory was not a product of superior technology, but of chaotic improvisation." "That's about right," the human replied. "And you should have known. We've got a pretty solid history of that sort of thing. Ever heard of duct tape?" "Duct tape?" Althal repeated, the alien equivalent of a frown creeping across his features. "Yeah, it's this sticky stuff we use to fix everything. Cars, spaceships, even plane wings in a pinch." The human grinned. "It's kind of our thing, making something work when it really shouldn't." Vrex folded his upper limbs, considering the implications. The human wasn't lying, that much was clear. And yet the sheer absurdity of what he was saying defied all conventional logic. A species that relied on slapdash ingenuity rather than meticulous planning? It was almost too ridiculous to believe. "You mentioned earlier that humans don't fight alone," Vrex said. "Explain." The human's grin widened. "Oh, right. That part's important. See, you've been looking at humans as individuals. And yeah, individually, we're not much. A human with a stick is just a guy with a stick. But give that guy some friends and suddenly he's got a catapult. Then give him some more friends and they'll figure out how to launch that catapult from a moving ship." "You're describing cooperation," Ovlan said, unimpressed. "All intelligent species rely on some form of cooperative behavior." "Yeah, but humans take it to the next level," the human countered. "We don't just cooperate, we adapt to each other. When we're in trouble, we pull together in ways you can't predict. We use what we've got, even if it doesn't make sense. Especially if it doesn't make sense." Vrex's antennae twitched as he mulled over the human's words. There was a kernel of truth in them, as infuriating as it was to admit. The Althal-Tor prided themselves on their rigid hierarchy and strict protocols, but this human seemed to be describing the opposite. A chaotic, decentralized network of individuals working together out of sheer necessity. It was a level of adaptability that no simulation could have predicted. "Your methods are reckless," Vrex said finally. "You take unnecessary risks." "Maybe," the human admitted, "but those risks pay off. Take your drone, for example. You probably thought it was invincible, right? You figured no way a bunch of hairless apes could take it down. But here's the thing. We didn't need to outsmart it. We just needed to out-crazy it." "Out-crazy?" Ovlan said, his voice rising in pitch. "This is nonsense. You cannot expect us to believe that a civilization's success is predicated on madness." The human shrugged. "Call it what you want. Madness, creativity, desperation. It's all the same when you're fighting to survive." Vrex could see Ovlan struggling to maintain his composure. For all their training and experience, the Althal-Tor had no framework for dealing with a species like this. Their algorithms and predictions relied on patterns, probabilities, and calculated outcomes. The humans, it seemed, thrived in the absence of all those things. Before Vrex could respond, a faint beeping sound emanated from the human's wrist device. He glanced at it and frowned. "Looks like my ride's here," the human said, tapping a few buttons on the device. "I'd love to stick around and chat, but, you know, places to be, things to blow up." "What do you mean, ride?" Vrex demanded. "We have detected no ships in the vicinity." "That's because you're looking for ships," the human said cryptically. "Like I said, you guys think too big. Sometimes the simplest answers are the best ones." With that, he gave them a two-fingered salute and turned to walk away, whistling a jaunty tune as he disappeared into the smoky ruins. Vrex and Ovlan stood in stunned silence, watching him go. "What now?" Ovlan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vrex stared at the wreckage, the implications of their failure settling heavily on his mind. "We follow him," he said at last. "This human may be the key to understanding the true nature of their species." Ovlan hesitated but eventually nodded. Together they stepped into the ruins, their sensors scanning for any sign of the strange, infuriating human who had turned their mission into a debacle. For the first time in Vrex's long career, he felt truly out of his depth. But one thing was certain. Earth was far more dangerous than the Althal-Tor had ever imagined. The trail led Vrex and Ovlan deeper into the wreckage. Twisted metal groaned underfoot, and faint plumes of smoke curled into the sky. The human had vanished, but Vrex's scanner picked up faint traces of heat signatures, enough to suggest a direction. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea, but curiosity and duty outweighed caution. "This terrain is unstable," Ovlan muttered, eyeing the jagged remains of Earth-made equipment. "It would be logical to regroup and send another drone." "That logic is what brought us here," Vrex replied. "If we retreat, we learn nothing." They pressed on, moving toward a series of low hills marked by clusters of scorched vegetation. As they climbed, the faint hum of human machinery grew louder. At the summit, they found the source, a collection of crude but active systems. Solar panels cobbled together from reflective scrap, a communications array made from twisted antennae, and what appeared to be a launch pad lined with steel beams salvaged from Earth's derelict factories. The human was standing there, tinkering with a cylindrical object that glowed faintly at its base. When he noticed them, he waved cheerfully. "Hey, you found me. Nice work." He gestured to the array of equipment. "What do you think? Pretty good for something I put together in a few hours, right?" Vrex ignored the question. "What is this?" he demanded, gesturing to the glowing device. "Oh, this? It's nothing much. Just a little insurance policy in case you guys decide to send another one of those fancy drones." The human grinned. "Or, if you get any ideas about sticking around." Ovlan's feathers stiffened. "You threaten us with a weapon built from refuse?" The human shrugged. "Threaten is such a strong word. Let's call it a demonstration of capability. You've seen what we can do when we're cornered. Imagine what we could do if we really had time to plan." Vrex studied the human carefully. The confidence in his tone wasn't bravado, it was certainty. That certainty was more unsettling than any weapon. He glanced at the array of machinery again, noticing the complexity of its wiring and the precision of its assembly. For all the humans' talk of chaos and improvisation, there was clear intent behind this setup. "You realize," Vrex said slowly, "that your actions here could provoke retaliation from our fleet." "Sure," the human said, crossing his arms, "but you won't. Want to know why? Enlighten me." "Because you don't want this place to become your problem," the human replied. "Right now you think Earth is just a minor annoyance, a planet full of messy, unpredictable creatures. But if you push us too far, we'll stop being unpredictable. We'll become intentional. And trust me, you don't want humanity to focus on you." "Your threats are meaningless," Ovlan spat. "Our fleet could annihilate this planet with minimal effort." "Maybe," the human said, "but would it be worth it? You've seen what we can do with trash. Imagine what we could do with your technology if we got our hands on it. Would you really risk giving us that kind of motivation?" The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Vrex felt a cold clarity settle over him. The human wasn't bluffing. He wasn't threatening war or even survival. He was warning them about potential. A species that turned chaos into strategy and adversity into strength was a species that couldn't be contained. "Your confidence is remarkable," Vrex said finally, "but it may also be your undoing. Hubris often precedes destruction." The human smirked. "Maybe, but you're forgetting one thing. We're still here." The response was infuriatingly simple, yet undeniable. For all their flaws, humans had endured countless catastrophes, self-inflicted and otherwise, and come out stronger. The Althal-Tor had assumed this resilience was a fluke, a quirk of evolutionary chance. Now Vrex wasn't so sure. "What do you want?" Vrex asked. The question felt strange on his tongue, but it was necessary. The human seemed taken aback. "What do I want? Huh. No one's asked me that before." He scratched his chin, considering. "I guess I just want you to leave us alone. Go back to wherever you came from and tell your buddies that Earth isn't worth the trouble." "And if we don't?" Ovlan challenged. The human's grin returned, sharp and unsettling. "Then you'd better hope your fleet's shields are a lot better than your drones." Vrex stared at the human for a long moment, weighing his options. Every instinct told him to retreat, to report this encounter as a failure, and warn the Althal-Tor High Council about the unpredictable threat Earth posed. He didn't want to imagine the chaos this species could unleash if provoked. "Very well," Vrex said at last. "We will leave." Ovlan looked at him sharply. "Captain." "Enough," Vrex said, cutting him off. "This mission has yielded sufficient data. There is no need to escalate further." The human nodded approvingly. "Smart choice. And hey, if you ever want to come back and visit, maybe bring snacks next time. We like snacks." Without another word, Vrex turned and began descending the hill. Ovlan followed reluctantly, casting one last glare at the human before disappearing into the smoke. As they made their way back to their ship, Ovlan couldn't contain his frustration. "Captain, this is madness. We should annihilate this planet and be done with it." "No," Vrex said. "This species is not what we expected. They are not a problem to be solved. They are a variable to be respected." Ovlan's feathers quivered with disbelief. "You believe their threats?" "I believe their potential," Vrex replied. "And I believe that underestimating them would be the greatest mistake of all." Back at the landing site, the ship's engines roared to life. As they ascended, Vrex spared one last glance at the planet below. Earth was a strange, chaotic place, full of contradictions and surprises. But one thing was certain. It was far more dangerous than the Althal-Tor had ever imagined. And perhaps, in some twisted way, that danger was its greatest strength.